So, episode 4, Sarah, how are you feeling?
Okay, we use the word excited a lot, so I am going to choose another word. I am intrigued by this one.
That's actually a great word.
Thank you. It's something that I didn't have a lot of experience in myself when I was teaching. So, as you know, we had so many questions for Tom and he answered them like an absolute pro.
I did feel a bit sorry for Tom because we inundated him with unexpected questions, but like you say, he handled them well. I actually think a lot of the episode kept giving me nostalgia to being an actual student in school because we did have technology and people like my parents and grandparents would say, we didn't have that when we were there and I'm about to become that person. We didn't have iPads.
Absolutely not. Do you remember in primary school your first time that you used a computer or you went into the computing room? Do you remember that coming into school?
No, I remember having the overhead projector and it was like a laminated sheet and your teacher would write on it with these beautiful coloured pens. And if you were a particularly well-behaved child on that day, you could change it for them. That was a real accolade, wasn't it, being that child?
When you were in year 6 and you moved
Yeah.
from the benches at the back of the hall and you could change the laminating sheet on
Oh,
there.
yeah.
I do remember as well, in an English lesson, we had to draw a picture of a Jabberwocky. My work was chosen in the assembly to be put under the overhead projector and it was massive on the board at the back, and the pride that I felt from that was
Wow.
absolutely insane.
I'd be really proud as well. I didn't get anything on there. I just got to change slides. So I think that's enough, Jabberwocky. Let's go and listen to what Tom's got to say.
Hello and welcome back to STEM Conversation, a podcast created to share stories, ideas and experiences shaping science, technology, engineering and maths. I'm Sarah and I'm joined by my co-host Ash.
Hi everyone. Today we're joined by Tom Moseley, an Associate Assistant Head Teacher and Head of Innovation with over a decade in science education. Tom has contributed to whole school digital strategy implementation, redesigned curriculum at scale and supports school leaders nationally as an ambassador for the Shaw Education Trust and ARC Curriculum Plus.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and I'm really excited to have the opportunity to talk to you both.
Today, we are exploring a big topic that so many schools and teachers, I think, are thinking and talking about right now. We are looking at digital learning and technology in the classroom. We're going to be digging into some big questions today, thinking about, can it genuinely improve learning? Does it support teachers or does it create extra work? And how do we get it right? But before we get into the big themes, Tom, we like to ask all of our guests, what have you been working on recently and what's exciting you most in your career right now?
Yeah, for sure. So inside the classroom, I've enjoyed exploring the power of AI and what that can do to support teaching and learning, preparation, planning and workload, and share that across the team. But that's probably a whole other podcast in itself. Outside the classroom, I've had the opportunity to use my subject knowledge to write a series of teacher guides designed to support teachers of the new Health and Social Care AAQ, because that involves a whole entire unit of biology content, which is pitched somewhere between GCSE and A-level, which non-specialist staff might find tricky. And that's also involved some face-to-face CPD to a large number of delegates, which was a really cool experience.
Yeah, I mean, going back to your AI point, that is definitely another podcast in itself. But it's really interesting, I think, to see how you're already using it in the classroom. And it sounds like you are keeping yourself incredibly busy with everything. So thank you for finding the time to join us.
No problem at all.
Digital tools offer so much potential in education. In your view, what helps schools unlock that potential and build a digital culture that really supports teaching and learning?
I think the same principles apply to digital as when trying to develop any aspect of teaching and learning. I feel that teachers need time, space, and also the permission to develop and explore whatever it is that they're being asked to do. You can't just put devices in the hands of staff and students and expect things to work first time and without a hitch. You do need dedicated time for CPD and training, and that's for both staff and students. You can't assume that everyone knows what they're doing. And it's really essential that you have a clearly structured and phased rollout. That could even involve periods of practice or a trial with certain groups in certain year groups before you decide to launch something whole school. And then following that, Staff also need the space to practice outside of that training, which may be on their own. It may be show and tell as part of a department meeting or further training or CPD. And things are going to go wrong. You're going to get lack of connection. Things won't load. They won't display properly. You won't cast to the board. And staff need to know that that's okay, and that they have permission to experiment and that things can go wrong. To support that, having numerous go-to members of staff around the school, within the subject or within faculty teams, digital champions as they're known here in our setting, can play a really key role in offering that day-to-day support and feedback. And at the core of all this, any digital strategy, whether it be devices or platforms, must be introduced because it enhances the learning and not just because it's new and exciting.
Interestingly, on this podcast, in our other conversations, we've spoke quite a lot about things not going to plan. And I think when it comes to technology, people are quick to say, what if it doesn't work? But like you say, I think with that safe space and that support to try it, you can then move forward, can't you?
Yeah, for sure. It's like the first time you ever deliver a new topic or explain something to a class for the first time, you might muddle your words, you might misstep. And it's only when you've had that time, you've done it more than once, that things start to become second nature.
I think for me, technology going wrong seems to instill this fear in me that other things don't. And I suppose it's not having that toolkit to be able to think, okay, well, if this doesn't work, what else can? So it definitely comes down to teacher confidence. So you've shared with us there a bit about culture and vision for digital learning. And a big part of that is making sure that every single learner that you come across in the classroom, in the school, benefits. How can technology support equity and inclusion and ensure that absolutely no young person is left behind?
It's a really important question, as there's definitely evidence to suggest the potential to widen the gap rather than close it when it comes to equity and inclusion if you don't get things right. When implementing a digital strategy, it largely depends on three things, according to the research: access, adaptability, and reliability. Every student needs consistent access to devices, both in schools and at home. The tools themselves need to be flexible enough so that they support the different learning needs of the students. And also within the building, the technical infrastructure has to be rock solid. If the Wi-Fi drops out or a student can't save their work, then the learning experience breaks down instantly. But it's not just about access, it's also about inclusion. And only with that proper training and support will staff be able to confidently utilize all the tools that are available to them. There's a wide variety of accessibility features that a year or so ago I had no idea about or how to use them. Things like text-to-speech, the fact that you can record and playback learning episodes at a later date. And now we have the potential to provide additional visual scaffolds or cues only as and when needed, and to the students that need them.
Tom, while you were saying the things you're saying there, it actually gave me such flashbacks to when I was at school and technology wasn't advanced. You know, when you were talking about students not saving their work, when now all our work saves as we go, doesn't it automatically? But when I was at school, someone would turn your tower off when you were working and you would have to convince the teacher you'd done all your work but it just hadn't saved. So even that small step in technology there is probably going to make a monumental difference, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And I think many of us probably can remember wheeling out the laptop trolley, where they previously wouldn't have been plugged back in from the last class that used them. They would take the entire lesson to turn on and it would turn into a complete shambles and a waste of time. It's not to be taken for granted that, if students don't have access, which some don't, to a standalone PC device at home, the first time they might be learning to save or open a document could be with you. And we're really fortunate that the learning platform that we use when students are writing and annotating their work, it will automatically save when they click done.
Can I just give an absolute shout out to any primary teachers listening, because they will know my pain with what I'm about to say. Is teaching children to save a document for the very first time is absolutely a lesson, if not multiple lessons in itself.
Yeah.
And the amount of patience and small steps that takes in order to get them to just learn how to save something is incredible. Really, so it's great to see that they can save it without issues.
Does anyone ever pretend it's not saved just so that they can get out of it?
The biggest one is if the iPad isn't charged, I think is probably the biggest barrier, to be perfectly honest. We use a platform where it allows us to monitor the screens that the students are using. So you can see what they're doing. They don't really have an excuse in that regard with regard to auto saving work, because if they're on the work, they're on the work and it's going to save it. So I think between circulation around the room and monitoring on your own device, then they can't really get out of that one.
But they might try, I'm sure.
Now let's picture a real lesson. What does meaningful digital learning look like for students and teachers?
Again, I think you mustn't see digital learning as a separate entity to learning under normal circumstances. If it's going to work well, the two must be equitable and must be seen in the same light. If meaningful learning goes beyond just completing the task in front of you or rote memorization, and we start to think of it as active learning, deepening that conceptual understanding, then the meaningful digital learning should only serve to enhance this. And if it doesn't, it shouldn't be shoehorned in just for the sake of. One of my favorite uses is to cast, from a STEM perspective, to cast practical activities or a demonstration to the board whilst recording it, using the iPad as a mobile visualizer, if you will. And then this, for us, is instantaneously uploaded to the learning platform that the students use. So they can review it at their own pace to support with any activities that might follow. For a similar reason, I've found modeling on the iPads to be particularly effective, not just because without the barrier of printing, you can be working on and showing students the exact same worksheet that's in front of them on the desk or on their own iPad, if it were. Another excellent use would be digital quizzing. So having instantaneous access to RAG-rated responses from any assessment for learning that's done in a lesson can be really powerful. And that's not to say everyone completely abandons or diminishes the impact of something like a whiteboard, but that also comes with its logistical challenges, handing them out, collecting mint, making sure the lids go back on pens and everyone's got a rubber and isn't using the sleeve of their shirt. And it happens. Live marking is another really powerful things that can be enhanced digitally. Our platform allows us to drop into a piece of work that a student is working on and cast that to the board. So you can then live mark that exact piece of work on their iPad, which will show your annotations, but everyone can see. For exam year groups, for example, for year 13, you can be marking live a student's exam response whilst on split screen with the mark scheme at the same time. So you can narrate your thought process as you're going through that. You can explain why you would give a mark, why you wouldn't give a mark, and so on. And then finally, it's really important that you are keeping a track of what students are doing. It would be, I'm sure for everyone, very tempting in a particularly boring lesson to, hop onto YouTube or their favorite, whatever. So monitoring tools are really important, being able to see what the students are doing, and also making sure that you have control over what they can access as well.
I keep going back to when I was at school, but we used to play a game. We used to, in our computing rooms, obviously the teacher couldn't see every single computer because they're so big and bulky. There needs to be a proper adapted seating plan for every screen, which I think is probably another advantage of the iPads, isn't it? You can see everyone. They're not blocked by a screen. But yeah, we used to go on this game where this rabbit jumped around. And if the teacher got up, we'd be like, get off, get off. I'd get caught out now, wouldn't I?
Yeah, it was stick cricket in our classroom. Everyone logged on to stick cricket and was trying to get the highest score before the lesson finished.
I've never played stick cricket.
Neither have I.
Yeah, it was pretty simple because all you need is the arrow keys, so you could figure it out pretty simple.
It's like the Google game where you can jump.
That's the one. I think that was the one it was. Was it a rabbit jumping? Or was it not
or
a
a
rabbit?
dinosaur, is it?
Oh, wow. Call me a science teacher. I don't know the difference between a rabbit and a dinosaur. Tom, from a secondary science perspective, I am really interested in the sort of live casting, filming of the experiments because I don't know if you've read the curriculum and assessment review, but it does allude to the fact that often teachers play a YouTube video, an online video of someone else doing an experiment. But this could essentially eliminate the need for that and make sure that the language being used during the video is the appropriate exam board language and age group language, even the language for that country, opposed to being perhaps Americanized.
My practice developed significantly when I started using a visualizer for modeling activities, pen and paper. It just has much more in terms of going from a whiteboard and a pen. From a PowerPoint, you've got to step away from that crutch, and then to go live under the screen yourself, it just seemed to have more impact, that it looked like what the students' work did. And then the idea that instead of having all the students crowded round an area of the room, a front desk, their desk, to try and see what you were trying to demonstrate with the practical, well, the biggest screen in the room with the best facilities and viewing is the board.
Yeah.
So showing things from under the visualizer to the board was such a powerful change. There are some that the students cannot physically do. If, for example, you're doing the ripple tank, I'm not sure how many schools have a class set of ripple tanks, but I know we don't. So modeling activities like that, especially when it allows you to, even on the visualizer, that you could take a picture of a particular frame, you could annotate. It was a pure spur of the moment discovery in the middle of a circuits practical, because they never work as you expect them to work. And there's always something going wrong where even the most basic of circuit diagrams students struggle to follow. Well, hang on a second. I'm in the middle of the room. I've got a perfect view of everybody. And I just gave my iPad to the student who was working on that group and said, pointed at the practical. And they held the iPad whilst everyone followed along as I showed them step by step how to connect that circuit. And it was just a game changer. I was in the middle of the room from the side. I had a perfect vantage point of everybody. They could see exactly what I was doing on the board, and it was transformative. And that's evolved over time to actually recording it as we go. It allows students to play it back.
I was really impressed with the fact you could see all the students' screens from your iPad. But I was curious how that compared to circulating the room. But it sounds like you're circulating the room with your iPad, so able to get what they're up to from all angles.
So from that regard, it really does become a mobile visualizer or a mobile video camera. So you can be at the back of the room looking from over everyone's shoulders. And the same goes when delivering your lesson and annotating as well. If you feel like you have class where, you need to break away from the board, you need to move from that central vantage point, then you can annotate from the side of the room.
So we hear both sides of the conversation. Some teachers are very pro technology, say it saves them a lot of time. Others may argue that it creates extra pressure and new tasks to learn. What have you seen in your setting, and how can digital tools really support workload rather than add to it?
You can't expect to introduce anything or develop any aspect of teaching and learning without some initial effort to get things off the ground. And I think that's why not only is the time and space to develop that really important, but you also have to show the benefits that can be had. That if you are able to very clearly outline to staff that here are all the things that we have access to and that we can benefit from, but we've just got to get there. So, for example, during the first stage of development, it did take staff a short while to orientate themselves around the platform that houses all of our lessons. And there was a period of trial and error involved to get the most efficient and logical structure to keep things organized. Now that's up and running, it's absolutely crystal clear to both staff and students where and how to find the resources for a particular topic or lesson. And students carry that around with them in their bag all day, every day, and when they go home too. I think for most staff, the obvious would have to be not having to spend hours at the printer. That's, a big part of teachers' life that is significant enough to notice. It's not to say that doesn't happen at all, because it still does, and work does still happen in books on worksheets, but not all the time. And another huge one would be the ease at which those lesson materials can be created in an adapted manner and distributed accordingly, such that you can click on a sheet and decide which student can see what sheet or which part of the sheet, etc. Which again is another really powerful tool. At the most basic level, that could be some in the moment prompts or a scaffold that you assign to a select number of students. There's the option within that lesson to just open up a blank document, write a couple of sentence starters on, and just ping it to a couple of students that are struggling at that particular moment.
I am really intrigued to know how quickly you can do this in a lesson. How quickly can you get something that is adapted to learners in a lesson?
When we put resources onto this platform, it is as simple as dragging and dropping from our folder structure on our laptop into that lesson. if you are trying to do it there and then on your iPad from your OneDrive, it does get a bit clunky. But on your laptop, which you can have open at the same time, you drag the files over.
Wow.
When you click on that file, you have the option to select who sees it. And if you don't know whether you're going to need it, or you want to hold something back for later in the lesson, because there's always that one kid who just wants to plow on regardless and without you, then you can just, who can see it, select none. So that resource is essentially hidden from the students until you want it to be.
You mentioned about worksheets, which I agree were the bane of my life when I was teaching, trying to get them glued into books.
Yeah.
Do you have traditional exercise books alongside the iPads, or is predominantly the work done on the iPad?
I think experience tells us that we still need that physical practice of putting pen to paper at different stages. So we select the pieces of work for that lesson. We identify ahead of time which work is going to be done on the iPad. We still usually operate on a model where we would like some independent work done in an exercise book within a lesson.
Screen time's something that we hear a lot about at the minute, especially from parents and schools. There's a growing body of research that explores the risks, but also the educational value of digital use. What does the evidence tell us, and how should schools really approach this conversation?
As a parent myself, this is 100% one of the first things that popped into my mind when we started those initial phases of launching our digital strategy. It was like, well, hang on a minute. We spend so much time trying to get students off screens, and now we're asking them to spend all day on one. But the reality is that focus should be on what they're doing over how long. Because they're not staring at a screen for all 1 hour of every lesson. That's not what's happening. And also by utilizing the devices only for the activities that contribute meaningfully to the learning, then this provides that initial barrier to overuse. It's also about ensuring that they don't displace other essentials like physical activity, face-to-face. It's not like PE are doing simulated games. They're still going outside. This is where there's a clear and stark difference between educational use and other things like doom scrolling social media or getting lost down a YouTube rabbit hole or endless hours gaming into the early hours. And that's normally what we associate with the screen time conversation is you're honed in on a very small screen right in front of your face and you're not potentially doing something that productive. I have so many very, very unpopular conversations with students at parents' evening where I recommend the parents take their phone off them while they're doing revision, or that the phone is left downstairs, for example. But there are those tools, as we've kind of mentioned before, that we have access to on the iPads that allow us to monitor and safeguard to ensure they are being used appropriately for teaching and learning. The same platform that allows us to view all the screens at once on our screen, you can shut them down and lock all the screens at a moment's notice.
We all know science is a very hands-on subject. There'll be times the students need to go outside for sort of field work or doing a bit of exercise and measuring the heart rate before and after. I think that the clarity there is the iPads are used when it enhances learning. They're not just used to be like, cool, and here's some tech.
Have you had any parental pushback on it? And I suppose this would be more in the implementation stage or when you decided to introduce the digital tools. Did you have any parental concerns around screen time or behaviour or anything else that we've discussed?
I think screen time, less so. I think working in the secondary sector perhaps presents different challenges to primary in that there has been concerns over what students could access on a device if they wouldn't necessarily have a device or smartphone, which would have been a parental choice. That's where the filtering and monitoring systems of a school comes into play. Because even when those devices are not on site, what is being accessed will still ping up and flag on our system.
Do they take them home with them?
Yeah, the students.
What?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot of stuff, isn't it?
It is. And some parents will say, well, I wouldn't have bought this for them and I don't want to pay for them if something were to happen. But that's about where that school parent relationship really comes into play and making sure that everyone fully understands the potential benefits, fully understands their role in the process, and the idea that accidents happen.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that, I mean, whisper it quietly, but I broke my iPad at the start of the year. I don't know why this mysterious crack appeared all the way over the screen,
You
but
heard it here first. You heard it here first.
Exclusive.
there's a difference between intentional misuse and accidental misuse. And, you know, there is perhaps a whole other side of this that people haven't considered, but that's why you have a team. That's why you have a collective working on these systems in a secondary setting with between 12 and 1,500 students. Conversely, if they didn't take them home every day, that's a lot of stuff to hand out every morning. But we do have online learning packages. Many schools will have purchase subscriptions to platforms they use for homework. And we mentioned right at the very beginning about accessibility, inclusion, and equity. Well, if all your homework is online, but a student doesn't have a device to complete it on, you know, how fair is that? Or are you making them miss their breaks and lunchtime to go to homework club? So for students who otherwise wouldn't have that access, it's a game changer. It really does support them in ways that go above and beyond. If you find that there are parents where they don't have, we spoke about infrastructure in the building, but things like Wi-Fi, well, that's where your year teams and your pastoral teams and the inclusion team can work with those families. Maybe there's parts of budget that can support with that. I remember in COVID times when devices had to be given out to students working at home, and the laptops were provided with Wi-Fi dongles for some because they didn't have internet access at home.
Now I'm over the initial shock of over 1,000 iPads being sent home with teenagers. I actually think it's a really, really good move. I think that we say that a lot of our teaching life is made easier by forming strong relationships with the students. And I think giving them their own iPad and that responsibility of looking after it, and like, we trust you with this thing, and they'll know they're expensive. They'll know it's cost, you know.
Yeah.
I think that is probably going to be a really good stepping stone into the students feeling valued at school.
I think so. And I think there's a whole number of reasons why different responsibilities have been taken off students at different times. In that, I remember when I was in secondary school, I had to take all my books home with me.
I did.
This, the concertina folder thing in my bag that I'd slot them in and look after them. But then the reality is that not everyone does that. And teachers are under pressure to keep work and to keep their marking safe. And then some settings, well, then those books don't go home because the safest place is in the classroom ready for next lesson.
We have talked about some ways that iPads can be powerfully used within the classroom. Can you share some specific examples of how technology can support practical science and demonstrations?
So, as we've already mentioned, the mobile visualizer and mobile camera is by far my favorite use. Now that I've trialed it, now that I've started, the ability to display and cast what I'm doing on a practical activity to the board so that students can see from their desk with the equipment in front of them in real time really is a game changer. And as we said, if you haven't got an iPad in your hand and students haven't got one yet, well, the visualizer would be the next logical step, even if you are tethered to your front desk and your laptop. In terms of practical activities, some drawbacks to pen and paper might be that you only have a fixed period of time into which to get things done. You might not want to spend all morning at the printer having to print out tables and instruction sheets and so on for your students. But likewise, do they have time in the lesson to be drawing tables and graphs and from scratch all the time, every time? Curriculum time is tight, lesson time is tight. So, you know, you're not hampered by printing, whether that's color printing, which I know some people are. You can have color images on there that show the practical taking place step by step. And those visual clues for particular learners can be the difference between them being able to set it up and not. Being able to record via the iPad, whether that be the practical or you can record your screen during your modeling. So, for example, if I'm showing students how to rearrange a particular equation, how I would talk through and model the work, they can play that back as they're trying their own questions. The ability to almost rewind that and go backwards, they can see those steps developing on the page in front of them there and then.
So digital tools are evolving quickly and AI is increasingly becoming part of the conversation. How do you see iPads and AI complementing each other in the classroom? What opportunities might that open up for teachers and students?
Hmm. I think personally AI is such an exciting opportunity, and one I've really enjoyed exploring myself, but I would be lying if I didn't say that it did present some challenges, not least for students in terms of offering up a perceived easy path to an answer, which may or may not be factually correct and may not be at the level that you need them to know it at. There's different levels to AI. At the individual level, what students and staff can do themselves, and also at a grander scale where platforms and software use AI and algorithms to tailor and support learning based on input. And, in my experience for staff, the greatest benefit comes when AI is not seen as a replacement, but almost viewed as a high output sidekick rather than the brains of the operation. That so much of the criticism of the fact that it is prone to error, hallucinations, and bias. But I found the more blank slate you give it, the more open to interpretation the response is. The classic, plan me a lesson on photosynthesis. It's going to give you so much unnecessary information when it's given that blank slate. Whereas actually, if you're using it to enhance what you already have and what's already in place, then that's where AI comes in. If you use a clear and effective prompt, you could take material from a lesson and ask it to do something with it, like generate a series of multiple choice, specifically designed to identify misconceptions without having to spend hours doing it.
To add to that, I've experienced a lot of people suggesting that maybe using AI is an easy or even lazy option. But I think that to effectively use AI, writing a good prompt is actually such a skill. It's not easy to get AI to plan 10 multiple choice questions for you without telling it the exam board language that perhaps you are aligned to and that you want to feature
Yeah.
in it, some prior knowledge that you might want to pull on, the age of your class, the attainment level of your class. There's so many things.
Mhm.
You can't just type, give me 10 multiple choice questions, because it's going to give you some really abstract that don't really suit your learners. I did use AI a little bit to write LinkedIn posts earlier in the year. And I realised
Mhm.
it was really obvious that I'd done it because I didn't give any of my personality. I didn't perfect my prompting to AI very well. And actually, one of my friends messaged me and said, it's really obvious you've used AI. So,
And
yeah.
every sentence starts with, here's the thing.
So it was when I was asking rhetorical questions, which I just never do in my day-to-day life. And I was putting bullet points in every single post when I don't normally do that either.
One thing that people haven't actually thought of is asking AI to write the prompt, which it does a really, really good job of.
Stop.
See, I can see the face. Yes, game changer. So if you actually want it to do something really well, if you use some sort of framework, give it some context, give it some information as much as you can, and then task it with, I really want to be able to generate this, write a prompt that will allow you to do that. And what I've found that that's enabled me to do is that I have probably 3 or 4 template prompts saved that I just tweak those parameters every time. You can never replicate the output exactly, but it does a pretty good job.
I hope people are watching this opposed to listening to it, because I think my face for that answer was just like jaw open.
Well, see, and then what I'll do is I will repost all of those LinkedIn posts from about 3 months ago. So they're right at the top. If anyone wants to check me out, then you'll find them all right there.
Yeah.
So when schools do move towards one-to-one device models, what are some common mistakes or challenges that you've seen, and how can schools overcome them?
I think there are 2 really big traps that are easy to fall into. The first one would be trying to do everything at once. And then number 2, focusing on software and fancy gadgets over pedagogy. A one-to-one device strategy is a huge investment financially, and yet equally investment needs to be put into the time of both staff and students to ensure that they're fully trained and equipped to use them well. Going back to point 2, it's so easy to get lured into the latest app or software, or be tempted to integrate everything everywhere all at once. But that really can lead to overwhelm and cognitive fatigue very quickly. And it's all a case of making sure you return back to the learning, back to the pedagogy, and what's going to have the biggest impact. The other thing would be the importance of technical stability across the school, which in terms of infrastructure and IT systems, that's way beyond my expertise. But if you don't have a suitably qualified IT department or technician that can support in that, then that's going to be something that causes real issues.
Your IT team must be very, very on board with it.
And very nervous.
Yeah.
Very patient. Yeah.
Yeah, well, especially when the Wi-Fi goes down, because that does cause quite a few problems
Yeah.
across the school. But thankfully, that doesn't happen very often. And then when it does, they usually have a solution pretty quickly.
If a school wants to begin improving their digital practice tomorrow, what is one simple, practical piece of advice that you would give them?
So I think I would like to cheat and give two. And that
Okay.
That's fine.
that would be based on technical expertise and availability, because everyone listening to this is going to be at a completely different point in their journey, or maybe they're not even on the journey and are just interested to see where it could take them. So if students don't already have a device in their hands, which many might not, then the most accessible to staff would be some form of digital modeling. So if you have a device but the students don't, consider how you can move away from the whiteboard to modeling on your device, or even better, as we suggested, using it as a mobile camera for modeling and demonstrating practical activities, because after all, this is a STEM podcast. I cannot stress enough what a difference that has made. It is a game changer, as they say, on GPT.
Aye.
If you don't
Googled that answer.
if you don't have a device, yes. And if you don't have a device of your own yet either, then do you have a visualizer? Because that would be the next step down. And if you don't, well, then you really, really need to pester your department, head of department for one, because until I got my iPad, I would use one every lesson without fail. And I'm pretty sure that does still count as a digital device.
Goes to show that the definition of digital can be a little bit broader than perhaps I'd thought, because 100% visualizer used at every lesson, obsessively, I'd say. In fact, even now that I work remotely, I've got a stand that holds my phone over what I'm doing, almost the same way that a visualizer works. I just think they're incredible. And I know we've spoken about modelling. I think modelling really amplifies learning, but instead of walking away from your desk to your whiteboard and then turning your back on the class, you stood facing them. You can ask questions, you can keep them engaged. There's one less paper aeroplane flying across the room because you are facing them all. And I think that is golden. And it just sounds like the devices you're using allow that and all the benefits of that, but whilst roaming around the room and having what you've got in front of you then accessible on the student's device.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's where there's a real difference there. So number one, you're not tethered to the desk. And then number two, the modeling that you do is accessible right there and then on the students' devices.
It's those little tips and tricks, isn't it? Things that you do it once and then you think, right, I'm going to talk to somebody else about that. I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, definitely.
So to end our conversation, we always ask our guests for one key takeaway. We are going to pin you down to one for these ones as well. You can't cheat and have two. So what's one idea, perspective, or piece of advice you'd love listeners to carry away with them today?
So I'd say that you have to view technology as an enabler and not a replacement. That the teacher remains the most important factor in the learning, full stop. And the goal isn't to have more screens, just smarter and better uses of them. And every decision about the digital strategy should start with the question, how does this help us teach the concept better than before? And if you can't answer that clearly, then the investment probably isn't worth it. Not just monetarily, but we're talking about the time investment in a lesson, then you shoehorning digital into that episode for no reason whatsoever isn't going to be worth your time. So when teachers are equipped with the right training and the confidence to use the technology, it really can have such a significant and profound impact. It stops being a distraction and starts being a genuine enhancer for learning.
Yeah, I love that phrase. How does this help us teach the concept better than before? It really shifts everything back to purpose, doesn't it? So
Mhm.
it's not focusing on the tool, but it's focusing on the why. And I think if schools can build that sort of culture, I'm sure that's where digital learning really starts to make a difference for everyone.
Tom, thank you so much for joining us on this episode.
It's been amazing to hear how digital technology is evolving, and we hope this episode really helps schools think about how technology can meaningfully support teaching and learning.
Thank you both so much for the opportunity. I've really enjoyed being a part of this conversation, so thank you.
And thank you to everyone listening. Don't forget to follow STEM Conversations wherever you get your podcasts, and join us next time for more stories and ideas shaping science, technology, engineering, and maths.